uh, hindi ko pala alam kung sa klase nyo to. Um, when we talk about philosophy, uh, usually we use the lexical definition in defining the term philosophy. Lexical definition implies the dictionary meaning of the term. But unfortunately, if you look at your dictionary now, you will encounter the etymological definition. There, it only focuses on the etymological definition. And yung etymological definition of philosophy comes from the Greek word philo, which means love, and sophia, which means wisdom. So it highlights the notion of love of wisdom. But take note that in dealing with philosophy, we have to distinguish the difference between doxa and knowledge. Doxa is translated in English as opinion. So what is the difference between doxa and knowledge? Miss Palmero, distinguish the difference between opinion and knowledge.
Hello po, ma'am. For me po, ma'am, knowledge po, ito po yung something or information or idea po na proven or is either fact po. And then kapag opinion naman po, based po yun sa idea lang po ng isang tao and hindi po proven.
Is it possible to falsify knowledge? Is knowledge falsifiable, Miss Realine?
I think, ma'am, yes po.
Okay, thank you, Miss. Yung ethics po kasi, I've mentioned before that it has to do with human action. And ethics itself is inseparable with the notion of epistemology. Epistemology is one of the branches of philosophy that deals with the study of knowledge. So, mahalaga na in ethics to unravel the truths about things. Kailangan makita natin yung katotohanan sa likod ng mga bagay-bagay. Kasi otherwise, we will commit yung tinatawag nating epistemic violence. At kung titignan natin sa society natin, nakakapag-incur tayo ng epistemic violence kasi hindi natin ma-distinguish yung difference between doxa and knowledge and wisdom. At kapag hindi mo na-distinguish yung difference between knowledge and doxa, hindi mo ma-unravel yung truth. Example ng epistemic violence sa society natin is yung case ng lumad. Are you familiar with lumad? Familiar po ba kayo sa issue ng lumad? Hey guys, narinig niyo ba ako?
Yes po.
Yes po. Pero ako po ma'am, hindi ko not familiar po.
Hindi po masyadong familiar.
Okay, sila yung mga indigenous tribe dito sa Pilipinas. And last year, I don't know if kung it is correct to say that the government assaulted the lumads. Kung titignan natin kasi last year na-expose sa zone of violence yung mga lumad. Kasi kumbaga parang na-red tag sila eh. na tinuturuan sila na humawak ng baril, mga ganon, and they were actually displaced. They were removed from their own land kasi yung prospect ng government and even some of the corporations is to use their land for establishments or for business. So yun yung gusto ng corporations and government na magamit yung lands ng lumad para sa economic activities. That is one of the controversial aspects sa lumad case. Pero of course, dinideny ng government yung ganong klaseng accusation, and they were highlighting the idea that the lumads themselves were part of NPAs. And also last year, we also heard from the news that most of the schools of lumads were burnt down by the military personnel. But of course, we don't have sufficient evidences to validate those accounts kasi ang daming ngang narratives sa social media. But those were news that spread out in social media. So ma'am, ano yung epistemic violence doon? People from Manila areas and people and well-schooled, take note, well-schooled individuals, they have this tendency to discriminate the lumads because of the differences in terms of educational activities and based on cultural differences. Kasi magkaiba yung cultural practices ng mga Manileños at ng mga lumad. Magkaiba rin ang cultural practices ng mga or educational attainment ng mga well-schooled people o yung mga highly educated people. Kasi although very problematic yung notion of highly educated people, pero yun nga, iba yung perspective nila sa educational system ng lumad community. At kung titignan natin, kapag sinasabi natin na mababa yung klaseng education ng meron ang lumad or kapag i-discriminate natin sila based on their lifestyle, sasabihin natin the lumads were deprived of technological equipments to develop their culture or to improve the quality of their existence. Merong problema doon kasi sa pag-aaral ng anthropology, for instance, may epistemic violence na ginagawa yung mga Manileño, lalo na kapag ang nagiging objective nila ay yung impose yung kultura nila sa kultura ng mga indigenous people. Nagigets niyo po ba? May mga grounds kasi na gusto nating tanggalin yung indigenous people na nakatira doon sa mga remote areas, sa areas nila, para ilagay sila sa city. At pag nasa city na sila, we want them to adopt or to assimilate doon sa culture na meron tayo. Kapag pino-force natin yung kultura natin sa kanila, nag-i-incur tayo ng epistemic violence. At para sa maraming anthropologies, ay yung mga ganong klaseng activities ay unethical. Okay? So, punta tayo dito. Pero, meron pang ibang aspeto na kailangan ninyong makita kung bakit mahalaga yung ma-identify yung difference between knowledge and doxa. So, pag pinag-usapan natin yung doxa o yung opinion, sa libro ni Soksho, sa Archetypes of Wisdom, he mentioned that doxa has to do with conviction. So, sinasabi nila na ang doxa ay mere conviction. And kung mere conviction lamang ito, hindi to subject ng truth and falsity. At kung conviction lang to, ito ay personal stance lamang or subjective view ng isang individual. Samantalang ang knowledge naman, batay sa ibang manunulat, particularly in philosophy, they highlight the notion that knowledge implies justified belief. So sinasabi nila na kapag pinag-uusapan natin ang knowledge, pinag-uusapan natin yung konsepto na kung saan we are trying to justify our accounts by providing sufficient reasons or sufficient evidences to guarantee our conclusion or to warrant our conclusion. So kapag nagbibigay tayo ng argumento, pumapasok tayo doon sa knowledge. At ang knowledge is either theoretical knowledge or practical knowledge. Ang ethics ay nasa anyo ng practical knowledge. Ang theoretical knowledge is more on the theories. There are, like for instance, the Big Bang theory. It's more on the analytical justification of a certain analytical justification of a particular subject matter. So, ang knowledge po ay falsifiable. So, ang knowledge ay pwede nating ma-falsify. I think na-mention ko na yata yung isang example sa inyo, yung heliocentrism versus geocentrism. Like I said before, yung geocentrism sa napakabang panahon, it was embraced as it was accepted as truth. So for the long run, sa history natin, yung notion ni Ptolemy na geocentrism, ito yung tinatawag na katotohanan. Ito yung knowledge na meron yung mga progenitors natin. But this particular theory was actually debunked by Copernicus. Copernicus introduced to us the notion of heliocentrism. And that particular notion of heliocentrism was recognized by Galileo Galilei. And it was strengthened by Galileo Galilei when who invented the telescope. And it also strengthened by the theory of or justified by the theory of Johannes Kepler. So kung titignan natin yung transition, may mga katotohanan noon na hindi na nagiging katotohanan ngayon. Pero hindi natin sinasabi na yung knowledge noon ay walang value. Ito ay naging valuable during that particular time. Pero ngayong panahon natin, those particular knowledge are obsolete. So yung knowledge ay nagbabago-bago. Kaparehas lang ito ng morality, moral principles and yung tinatawag nating moral statements sa society na kinabibilangan natin. May mga cultural practices nga kasi tayo na tama noon pero hindi na siya napiperceive as tama ngayon. Katulad na lamang nung yung pagiging extreme conservative ng mga tao during the past. Dati kapag lalabas ang magjowa, hindi pwedeng maghawak kamay. Kasi kapag naghawak kamay yan, they were obliged to get marriage. to be married. So yun yung konteksto. Pero ngayon makikita natin na yung pag-holding hands, it has been normalized in the present society. Hindi siya nakikitang unethical, hindi rin siya nakikitang mali. Mahalaga yung question na to kasi yung knowledge kasi kapag nalaman nating pwedeng ma-falsify yung knowledge, mas nagkakaroon tayo ng kumbaga it motivates us to further our research or to conduct further investigation on a particular subject matter. It also allows us to engage in an interdisciplinary activities because interdisciplinary activities might help us to expand or enlarge our perspective on a particular subject matter. So, ano yung philosophy? What is philosophy? In philosophy, we learn to identify and think carefully about our most basic ideas and theories, those that support all the questioning for knowledge we do in other subject areas. So, I mentioned before na yung mga ideas na meron tayo in the mind, maaring ito ay na-inherit natin sa society, maaring na-derive natin sa particular textbook or na-derive natin from a particular lecture. At gaya ng sinasabi ko, you have to examine those ideas. Kasi those ideas have an enormous impact to oneself. It may affect your perspective in life, it may affect unconsciously your behavior, etc. Okay? So, isang example na lang, for instance, ng difference between science and social sciences like philosophy. Kung bakit hanggang ngayon, pinag-aaralan pa rin natin sa tertiary level yung philosophy. Or pinag-aaralan pa rin natin sa tertiary level yung social sciences like history and sociology and psychology. For instance, this is the case study. Case study, Lisa's been caught shoplifting from her local department store for the third time in as many weeks. The police are called. She is arrested and charged with theft. When her case comes to court, her lawyer argues in her defense that Liz is a kleptomaniac. So, usually kasi sa law, kapag nagnakaw ka, kapag masyadong focus lang tayo dun sa event or yung sa circumstance, yung verifiable circumstance, maaaring makulong kaagad si Liz. Pero yung social sciences kasi, hindi lang siya nakafocus doon sa isang aspeto na nagnakaw si Liz. Hindi lang siya ganon. Kundi tinitingnan niya pa rin yung other factors na maaari nating i-consider sa kaso ni Liz. And isa nga doon is yung psychological state of mind ni Liz. Para sa mga psychologists and some of the social scientists, it is very essential for us to discuss behaviorism. And we should also pay attention to the psychological state of mind of a particular individual, and even the economic dimension that may affect the behavior of of that particular individual. So sa mga social sciences kasi, particularly in philosophy, sociology, psychology, may mga aspect na related sa human activities na kailangan silang tignan bago sila mag-render ng judgment on a particular situation. Hindi mo, para sa kanila, hindi tama na sabihan or sabihan na magnanakaw siya kaagad. May mga ibang factors pa na kailangan tignan. So, ano yung mga different areas ng philosophy? Yung unang area ng pag-uusapan natin is yung tinatawag na metaphysics. Metaphysics encompasses the study of what is sometimes termed the ultimate reality. As such, metaphysics raises questions about reality that go beyond sense experience, beyond ordinary science. Metaphysical questions involve free will, mind-body relationship, supernatural existence, personal immortality, and nature of being. So ito yung focus natin at ito yung focus natin sa metaphysics. Take note, itong mga topics na to ay related sa ethics. For instance, supernatural existence. Let's talk about God. Does God exist? Rina Basul. Does God exist? Nag-ghosting kayo? Rina, nandyan ka ba? Okay, ano na lang. Polo. Sophia. Sophia. Sophia? Wala din? So, how about Maureen?
Hello po, ma'am.
How to pronounce your word? Your name? Is it Mau?
Maureen po.
Mau. Maureen, sige. Miss, does God exist?
Yes po.
Yes, okay. If God exists, how can you justify the existence of suffering in this world? Knowing that by definition, God is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, and all-loving. So sabi mo God exists. So how can you justify yung account na evil exists when God is omnipotent, omniscient, omniperfect? Miss.
Ma'am, because parang evil is ano po? Evil is innate, ma'am, in our Evil is innate, ma'am.
Evil is innate.
Parang
But what is the source? What is the source? If God is all good and evil is innate to human beings, how come that God is the source of evil?
Ma'am, because parang ano po, evil test our faiths, ma'am. Parang when we suffer, we draw draw closer to God, ma'am.
So he allows suffering to exist in order to encourage his creation to have faith on him.
Yes, ma'am.
How can you justify the horrendous and abominable practices of war? For instance, in war, if you have read articles concerning World War I, World War II, or if you have stumbled the mass genocide in Rwanda, you will witness that there were a lot of innocent children and innocent people who were there were a lot of innocent children who suffered in war. How come that we could how can we justify the notion that God is good when he allows many individuals to experience extreme pain and suffering, like being exposed into war? Ano, Miss Maureen?
Ma'am,
Or anyone from the class? Yung mga ano dyan, Christian advocates,
Ma'am,
religious advocates. Yes, Kat.
ma'am, I think po si God, binigyan niya tayo ng free will. Although ginawa niya tayo, may sariling decision pa rin po.
And if that is the case, what is the source of evil? If that is the case, what is the source of evil?
Tayo po.
Tayo. Okay. Thank you, Miss Kat. James. James? Wala rin si James. Gab Alvarado. Wala din. Mga section na maraming nag-ghosting. Julius.
Good afternoon
Ana,
po.
Yan. Ayan. Mr. Julius.
Hello po.
Mr. Julius, ito ibang question sa'yo. If God does not exist, what will happen to human beings?
Well, if God does not exist, our existence will be the same po kasi there are people, especially living in secular countries who don't believe in God at all, right? And
Yes.
yeah, to acknowledge that God exists is fundamentally based from the gospel of Christianism, and there are countries who don't believe in God, and I guess to some, uh, like a scholar like me, would wonder how, how nerve-wracking it is if God is not does not exist, because we are accustomed to Bible gospels that God created Trinity of life, space, matter, and everything, and He's the creator of all beings. And if God does not exist, it's a great loss, because most of the people has faith in Him, and He is the source of our strengths, like that po. Well, to some who don't believe or who are atheists, I guess their life would still um, goes on, because they don't have the philosophy, or they don't believe in the existence of God at all po.
Yes, thank you, Julius. So I think the notion of God existence is very relevant in ethical discourse, because for instance in Christianity they have what we call Christian morality, and most of the uh, moral imperatives in Christian teaching were relied heavily on biblical uh, teachings. So kung titignan natin, relevant yung discussion of God's existence. And most of us are believers of God. But yung notion kanina ni Julius, i-remind ko lang kayo na hindi tayo confined uh, sa Christian scripture. Hindi tayo confined sa script sa Bible. Kasi kung papansinin natin, maraming different religious organization na nag-emerge sa society natin. And meron tayong tinatawag na Torah, at yung Torah ay yung bahagi ng classical Bible natin sa Kristiyano, pero yung Torah originally was the biblical text of the Judaism. Meron din tayong tinatawag na Quran. Hindi Bible yung hindi basta yung Quran kasi parang hindi talaga nila tinatawag na Bible. Basta Quran lang yung tawag nila doon. Ayun. So, marami tayong, pag pinag-usapan natin yung God, hindi lang to confined doon sa tinatawag nating monotheism o yung paniniwala sa isang Diyos, kasi merong mga tao that they embrace what we call polytheism. Monotheism means one God. Polytheism means many or many gods. At meron din tayong tinatawag na pantheism. Pantheism is nature is God. God is nature. Okay. Yun yung notion of pantheism. At meron din tayong tinatawag na animism, na everything has spirit. Para sa akin, napakahalaga na nitong mga primitive religious account natin. Kasi kung titignan natin, kung siguro meron pa rin tayong pagkilala doon sa kung ini-embrace natin yung pantheism, maaaring hindi natin niraransak yung nature natin. We will avoid ransacking our own nature or plundering our nature. Okay? So, maraming tao ang nagsasabi na kailangan natin ang Diyos para magkaroon tayo ng moral insight or moral perspectives. Pero kung titignan natin, tama yung sinasabi ni Julius earlier na may mga countries na maliit lamang na population nila ang naniniwala na meron pang Diyos. Mas malaki sa population nila ang persuaded sa scientific discoveries. and scientific knowledge. Sabi sa isang literatura ni Dostoevsky, sabi niya, if God is dead, everything is permissible. I think sa mga existentialists, katulad ni John Paul Sartre, napakahirap na isipin, meron siyang konteksto ng tinatawag niyang forlornness. Sabi niya, napakahirap kapag tatanggalin natin sa context yung God. Kasi pag nawala yung notion of God, ibig sabihin, wala na tayong natural identity. Kasi yung existence of God, yun din yung nagbibigay ng identification sa human beings. At kapag nawala din yung notion of God, wala na tayong i-blame. Kapag nabubuhay tayo sa dire circumstance, madaling sabihin na madaling gawing excuse yung Diyos kasalanan to ng Diyos. Pero kapag ni-remove mo sa context yung God, nakaka-experience tayo ng forlornness. And ethically speaking, wala tayong nakikita kundi yung sarili na lang natin na dapat maging responsible sa events. Pag walang Diyos, pag walang Diyos, wala tayong concrete or established purpose according to some existentialists. So, ayun, meron tayong konteksto ng God. At sabi kanina ni Kat yung notion of free will. Yung notion naman na yun ay maaari nating i-connecta doon sa notion ni Saint Augustine. Saint Augustine mentioned in his Confession and other literary works that God cannot be the source of evil. Evil is the privatio boni, or evil signifies privation of good. And if it means privation of good, it cannot originate from God. Evil exists and suffering exists because of human beings. Human beings have their own human beings has freedom, and because of their because they are imperfect beings, there are times that human beings are susceptible to mistakes. Nagkakamali ang tao. At kada pagkakamali niya, may tendency siya na makagawa ng evil. And that is the justification that was propounded by Saint Augustine. So meron na tayo nito. Mind and body relationship. So, mahalaga din yung notion ng immortality of the soul. For instance, sa Hinduism, kung kayo ay naninirahan sa ancient times, particularly Hindu kayo, at naniniwala kayo doon sa caste system, for instance, ano yung maaaring maidulot ng paniniwala sa immortality ng soul sa human behavior? Diskaya. Lawrence.
Hello po, ma'am.
Hello.
Sa tingin ko po, kung naniniwala po tayo na may second life, na immortal yung soul natin, makaka-apekto to sa behavior natin habang tayo nabubuhay. So, ang epekto nito is ayan, tendency nito. Lagi natin gagawin yung tama kasi sa notion na ng isip natin na pag gumawa tayo ng tama, sabi dito. Wait lang. So, ayun, pag gumawa tayo ng tama, tulad sa Christianism po, so naniniwala tayong may second life. Then, so pag gumawa tayo ng tama, mapupunta po tayo sa langit, which is, walang sufferings, walang kahit anong problema, walang sakit, then, habang buhay habang buhay lang na masaya. Yun po.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. How about Cruz? Jairo.
Hello po.
Hello. Ano yung profound consequences ng paniniwala natin, for instance, sa reincarnation?
For reincarnation po, as far as I know, kapag daw po may belief na kapag mabuti kang tao, sa next life mo, magiging maganda kang creature, parang magiging maayos yung buhay mo. Kaya kapag may ganun pong paniniwala, nandun pa rin po yung sense of morality, yung paggawa ng tama kaysa mali. Yun po.
Okay, thank you so much. So, kung titignan natin, sa metaphysics kasi, ayun nga, distinction between body, mind, and body. Sa classical textbook po, sa ancient Greeks for instance, yung mind kasi at yung soul ay minsan iisa lang yung meaning nila. So, ayun, pag-aaralan natin yung kung maniniwala tayo doon sa context of immortality of the soul at ito yung usual na paniniwala sa Hinduism. At ang Hindu ay dati meron silang caste system at yung pinaka mababa sa lipunan nila ay tinatawag nilang outcast. Ang reincarnation ay isa rin bahagi ng paniniwala ng mga Buddhist. May gets niyo po ba? At sa Buddhism naman, ang pinaka-objective nila is yung tinatawag nilang nirvana. Yung reincarnation sa Buddhist ay tinatawag nilang samsara, the cycle of birth and rebirth. Yun yung sa Buddhist. So kung titingnan natin, kapag meron kang notion, dadagdag ko lang pala. Sa Buddhist, meron silang notion of samsara, the cycle of birth and rebirth. Yung reincarnation sa samsara ay naka-align din doon sa tinatawag nating karma. Ang karma ay tinatawag nilang law of causation. So, para sa mga Buddhist, meron tayong good karma at saka bad karma. Kapag sinabi mong good karma, ibig sabihin, yung mga actions na na-rendered mo before, those are good actions. And now you are reaping good results. Pag bad karma naman, it implies that you had done something horrible or you had done wrong actions before and now you are reaping bad consequences, the bad consequences of your actions. So kung titingnan natin, malaki yung implication ng usapin ng soul. It could actually control the behavior of the social bodies. Kapag pinaniwalaan to ng tao, then it may influence his actions. malaki yung influence nito doon sa action ng isang individual. And perhaps he will be persuaded to reconsider all the moral imperatives that were imposed in the society. And as much as possible, he or she would strive to secure the purity of the soul. So may mga ganong konteksto, malaki yung implication ng paniniwala ng reincarnation kasi ayaw nating maging outcast sa society natin. Ayaw, lagi nating i-check, for instance sa Hinduism, lagi mong i-check, kapag gumawa ako ng masama, saang rank ako mapupunta sa case system? Ayaw ko mapunta sa outcomes. Kasi yung outcast, sila yung mga taong gumagawa ng menial work at ayaw ko ma-reincarnate na maghihirap ako. So I will strive to do good things. Okay? So ayun. Hindi ko na i-expand further pero yun yung insight sa metaphysics at gaya ng sabi ko, inseparable to doon sa ethics. Pangalawa is yung social and political philosophy concerned with the nature and origins of the state, sovereignty, exercise of power, the effects of social institution on individuals, ethnicity, gender, social status, and the strengths and weaknesses of different for him, we are egoistic beings. We prioritize always our own existence. And we are willing to limits our freedom, or we are willing to give our freedom to a sovereignty in order to secure ourselves. And that's the reason why we engage in social contract. Kaya meron tayong government. Ang driving force nan ay yung desire natin to preserve our existence. Because according to him, the chiefest evil is death. And meaning to say, what we wanted is to avoid death. Yung sovereignty and exercise of power, ito in the work of Michael Hart and Negre entitled Empire, they highlighted the notion of new sovereignty. New sovereignty is composed of hybrid organization. Take note that in the 21st century era, we are seeing the irresistible and irreversible globalizations, and there must be something that would govern the global community, o yung tinatawag ninyo sa sociology ninyo na global village. Kaya sabi ni Hart and Negre, meron tayong new sovereignty. But in the times of new sovereignty, we have to identify the power relations within the new sovereignty. In the work of Hart and Negre, they accentuated the idea that it was U.S. holds up. U.S. Was the one controlling the flow of monies, technologies, and people across the world, with the help, of course, of different financial institutions like IMF, World Bank, etc., and other international organizations. Pero yung new sovereignty, according to Hart and Negre, ang nagli-lead dyan ay ang United States because of their power in terms of war machines, or in terms eh, because of their advancement in terms of technologies and because of their uh, resources and economic capabilities. So kung titignan natin, relevant yung political and social philosophy sa pag-aaral ng ethics kasi for instance, nung nakaraan lamang, if you have read it or heard it from news, Donald Trump, he used the law to restrain the movement of the migrant workers in United States. And many migrant workers were suffering, many migrant workers had suffered in the policies. They suffered due to the policies that were implemented by Donald Trump. Yung tinatawag nating xenophobic policies. And yung policies na yon, it has an ethical issue. The humanitarian advocates questions the policies that disseminates the rights of people, particularly of the migrant worker. So, mahalaga na tignan natin yung political issues. And of course, the effects of social institution on the individuals. Ito, kung titignan natin, may mga institutions tayo. And usually, the state also the state also supervises the educational institution. We have to be wary about this particular situation precisely because educational institution can actually used by the state in order to produce docile bodies or obedient bodies that can be used for economic purposes. Ang sabi nga sa isang libro ni, halimutan ko yung author, pero there was a book in Philosophy of Education that I had read where he mentioned that what we are producing right now are cheerful robots. So sabi niya, hindi na radical na mga estudyante yung napoproduce natin. Ang napoproduce lang natin kadalasan ay cheerful robots. Yun yung mga yes people. Mga yes man. And these individuals are highly effective in economic purposes. They were used as a peripherals of machines, economic machineries. So, ayan, pinag-usapan din natin yung ethnicity, yung gender, social status, and strength and weaknesses of different societies. Ayan, when it comes to gender, may iba-ibang approach kasi yung societies when it comes to gender. Dito sa Pilipinas, hindi totoo na bukas yung isipan natin with regards to LGBTQ. Hindi pa talaga tuwirang bukas yung estado natin with regards to LGBTQ. Pero may mga gender development program ang bansa natin ay pinapatupad to ensure that the members of LGBTQ will be protected. That we could secure their rights, their dignity, and their fundamental freedom. And then next is yung tinatawag nating epistemology. It's from the Greek word for knowledge. It's the branch of philosophy that asks questions about knowledge. What is the origin? Whether or not it is even possible to have knowledge. Epistemological question involves the standard of evidence, truth, belief, sources of knowledge, gradation of knowledge, and memory and perception. I hope that everyone is familiar with this. One of the creation of Jonas Roses. This was entitled as Filipina Comfort Woman. Are you familiar with mamaya ko sasagutin yung questions na binato nyo dito. Are you familiar with Comfort Woman? Ichon.
No, hindi po, ma'am.
Hindi ka familiar sa Comfort Woman? Okay, thank you. How about Miss Salayo? Miss Salayo. Oo nga pala, hindi ko gusto mag-inflict ng kahit na anong violence sa loob ng klase ko, gender violence. Yung babasahin ko naka-base lang ako sa biological sex ninyo. Hindi ako naka-base sa gender ninyo kapag tinatawag ko kayong miss at saka sir. So I hope na hindi ako nakaka-offend sa members ng LGBTQ. But kung gusto nyong tawagin ko kayo na miss sa klase ko, just inform you kung member kayo ng LGBTQ na ayaw yung patawag ng sir, okay lang din sa akin. So, Miss Salayo.
Yes po, ma'am.
Familiar ka ba doon sa tinatawag nating comfort woman?
Yes po.
Okay, can you please provide them an overview about comfort woman?
So ang alam ko po sa comfort women is isa po siyang babae or babae nga po. Kaya po women, babae po na pinilit pong mag-engage sa isa pong sexual activity. Alam ko po kadalasan pong involved sa sexual activity between a comfort women is a Japanese soldier po.
Correct.
Yun po. Comfort women po, ang tawag doon sa mga babae po, ginagamit po ng mga Japanese soldier noon. Minsan po, meron pong iba tinatawag daw po silang prostitute. Pero, ang alam ko po, yung iba po sa kanila is hindi po willingly na naging comfort women po.
Okay, thank you. Hindi lamang sa Pilipinas na hindi lang sa Pilipinas kundi sa ibang bansa din. May mga tinatawag din silang comfort women. Kasi during the World War I hanggang papunta more on World War I, merong ini-establish na Japanese Imperial. Very powerful ang Japan during 1900s. They had able to conquer different countries. And every time that they would invade a particular community, they would choose women and subject those women in different sexual violence. Pag sinabi nating comfort women, kasi sila yung mga babae na nilagay nila may mga articles na nagsasabi na meron silang place, parang brutal house. At doon nila nilalagay yung mga babae na nahuhuli nila at pinipili nila na gamitin for their pleasure. Tapos kung babasahin ninyo, sobrang crucial. Kaya dito sa Pilipinas, maraming Filipina comfort women na ayaw lumabas. Kasi kapag nabasa ninyo yung mga articles concerning them, they were brutally assaulted and sexually they were molested crucially. Kasi kung titignan natin, every hour, merong gumagamit sa kanila. At take note, hindi lang isa, hindi lang dalawa. Madami yung gumagamit doon sa babae, sa mga Filipino women. And ito yung isa sa mga pinoproblema. Para sa akin, it is something that is very unlikely that we are not we are not educating our people about this particular issue. Diba sabi dito, standards of evidence, truth, sources of knowledge, gradation of knowledge, and memory.